Shalom, friends. Welcome to another Shear in Talmud. I'm Eliyahu Shear from Chesed Ve'emet. My site can be found on www.lovingkindness.co, and I'm coming to you from the holy city of Yerushalayim. So we're studying Gemara Berachot, Masechet Berachot, that means tractate blessings, and we're currently on Daf Tet Amud Beis, that's page 9, side B. We're making use of the Koren Talmud Bavli, as you see in front of you. It's a very beautiful edition, contains the original text, as we see over here. Also, we have the English translation with notes and commentary to help us understand what's going on, as well as various other notes on the side, photographs, pictures, and more to help us understand what it is that we're learning. We're at a point in the Gemara where I'm just going back to where we left off last week, where the Gemara proceeds to discuss the promise of redemption from Egypt that God made to Moses at the burning bush. When Moses asked God what to say, when Israel asks him God's name, and God said to Moses, this is where we're up to over here. You'll remember from last week's learning that we were speaking about certain things that were occurring when Moshe was going to take the Jewish people out of Egypt. And so the Gemara continues with this theme and speaks about some additional points related to the Exodus from Egypt. So this point over here says, Eke Asher Eke. This, of course, is one of God's names. And therefore, I've pronounced it as Ekiye instead of Eheye, which is actually the correct pronunciation, because this is actually one of God's names. I will be that I will be. Omar lo HaKadosh Baruch Hu leMoshe. Said the Holy One, blessed be He, to Moshe, to Moses. Lekemor lahem liYisrael. Go and say to them, to the Jewish people, Ani hayisi imachem b'shibud zeh. I was with you throughout this enslavement. Vani ehye imachem b'shibud malchios. And I will be with you at the time of the enslavement of all the other kingdoms in the future. Now, this is the wording over here, Eke Asher Eke. I will be, referring to the fact that I was the one who was with the Jewish people in Egypt. And Asher Eke is the double play on words, is teaching us that the same God that was with the Jewish people through their pain and suffering in Egypt will be the same God who will be with them in their pain and suffering throughout all the periods of time that the Jewish people are enslaved to the nations of the world as we are today. Well, when we're in a state, of course, that we're not free, there's no Mashiach, there's no Messiah in the world who has come to redeem the world and bring us into a state of freedom whereby we serve God without having to worry about the domination of the nations of the world and in general the rulership of the evil inclination over us. There is no temple, of course. There's no Beis HaMikdash, and that, of course, is the first sign that we're in a state of enslavement. We're not really serving God in a way of true freedom. So God is pointing out to Moshe at the time of the burning bush that when the Jewish people ask who it is who is going to take the Jewish people ultimately out of their state of exile, he should respond and say, Eke Asher Eke. The one who was with the Jewish people when they were in Egypt, he's also going to be the same God who will be with them throughout all of their pains and sufferings, ultimately until Mashiach reveals himself. All very well and good. Now, here on the notes, which we didn't read last week, and that's the reason that I'm going over this, is because it says the following. In the verse in Exodus, God replies to Moses' question with regard to the manner in which he should represent him to the children of Israel in two different manners. First, he said, I will be that I will be. And then he merely stated, I will be, as we're going to see in a few moments. The suggestion in the Gemara that God accepted Moses' argument is based on that difference. The Gemara explains this change by interjecting Moses' comment that future tribulations should not be mentioned at this point. Midrash Rabbah explains that God's original intent was to assure Moses that he would be with the children of Israel in future sufferings as well. He never intended that Moses would share that message with the people. Moses misunderstood God's command, and therefore God clarified his original intent, says the great Maharsha, Rabbi Shmuel Idles, the great Acharon who lived in the 16th century. Now, you see over here, so God is telling him that I will be, that I will be. But ultimately, Omar lefanav, Moshe responded to him and he said, Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe, Daya letzara bishata. Isn't it enough to have suffering in its time? In other words, do you really have to mention to us the terrible suffering that the Jewish people are going to go through over the next few thousand years? Omalo HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the Holy One, blessed be He, said to him, Lechem olahem, go and say to them, Ekyeh shelachani alechem, I will be, I will be has sent me to you. I will be has sent me. I will be, referring to God, has sent me to you to redeem you, which means to say that don't make mention of the fact that they will be going through many states of suffering. That is between you and me. As far as we're concerned, I'm telling you, Moshe, that I am the same God over here that went through the suffering together with the Jewish people in Egypt. I will be that same God in the future. But Moshe understood the statements, of course, to mean that God wanted him to reveal to the Jewish people that there will be further suffering. And so Moshe responded back and he said, God, it is not fair to discuss with the Jewish people the terrible suffering that they will go through in the future. So God said, that's not what I really meant. What I really meant is, between you and me, the concept is I'm going to be with them in their suffering. But as far as we're concerned here, just tell them, I will be has sent me to you. Fine. Now the Gemara continues with the same ideas that we're speaking about here. There's this type of repetition that's going on here. And so the Gemara brings us a play on this concept of words that repeats itself. Here is another teaching that relates to this repetition. Aneni Hashem Aneni. Eliyahu Hanavi, Elijah the prophet, had summoned the prophets of Baal to prove who was the real God in the world. Those of us who remember the story, the prophets of Baal wanted to prove that their gods were in charge of the world, and Eliyahu Hanavi wanted to prove that there is only one God in charge of the world. So Eliyahu Hanavi made an agreement with them that what they would do is they would present an offering to their respective gods. And all of the prophets of Baal would offer their offering to their gods and see whether or not the gods would accept the offering. And afterwards, of course, when the gods of the Baal, meaning he didn't receive the offering, he didn't do anything to receive the offering, then Eliyahu Hanavi would present his offering to the real God of the world, and of course God would answer him and consume this offering, proving that the God of the world, the one God of the world, is really the only God of the world, and everything else is just worth nothing. So Eliyahu Hanavi says, speaking to God, Aneni Hashem, Aneni, answer me, Hashem, answer me, meaning answer my prayer now, that you should accept this offering so that we're not going to be embarrassed in the eyes of the idolaters of the Baal. Omar Rabbi Abahu said, Lama Omar Eliyahu Aneni shtei pa'amim. Why did Eliyahu say the expression Aneni 2 times? He says, answer me, Hashem, answer me. Why did he have to say it twice? He could have just said it once. Melamed, it comes to teach, She'omar Eliyahu lifnei HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that Eliyahu said before in front of the Holy One, blessed be He, Ribono shel olam, Master of the universe. Aneni, one answer, answer me, Shetered eish min hashamayim, that fire should descend from heaven, v'tochal kol asher ala mizbeach, and it should consume everything that is upon the altar. Va'aneni, and then he says again, answer me, shetasiach da'atam, that you should divert their minds, their attention, kedei shelo yomru, in order that they will not say, ma'aseh kshafim heim, that the action that is being done over here, that the offering is being consumed with fire, is not to be considered like some sort of magic that I'm performing, but rather that this is truly that the offering is being consumed by the one and only God of all of creation. Shene'emar, like it says, V'ata hasiboisa es libam achoranis, and you have turned their heart backward. So God can restore them to the proper path as well. And this is the reason that Eliyahu davens to God in this expression, Aneni Hashem Aneni, which of course relates to the same idea we're learning in the Gemara of Ekia She Ekia, this double repetition. What does it mean every time we repeat something? Every word in the Tanakh has a value to it. And therefore, when the kings, when the prophets, when everybody involved in the stories of the Tanakh say certain words, when God says certain words in the Tanakh, every single word counts. And it's not just for nothing that it said, Ekie, Hashem, Ekie, or Aneni, Hashem, Aneni. Every single word counts. Every single word has a meaning to it. And that concludes the end of that very lengthy Mishnah, speaking about the time that we could say the Kriyat Shema in the evening. All of that related to that Mishnah. From what time, when can we recite the Kriyat Shema in the evening? And now the Gemara continues. New Mishnah. This abbreviation, for those who might be interested in studying a bit of Gemara language, refers to the word matnitin, which stands for our Mishnah. Our Mishnah says the following. From when may we start reciting the Kriyat Shema? In the morning. Our previous Mishnah dealt with the evening. And we remember the whole debate that was going on there, that we said, how come do we start the Talmud? Why do we start the Gemara with reciting the Mishnah, reciting the Kriyat Shema in the evening? Shouldn't we start the first Mishnah should say in the morning? And we learned over there, yes, but the day always follows the evening. Vayi erev, vayi voker yom echad. First it was evening, and then it was morning, one day. We've dealt with the evening and the evening Shema. And until when can we recite the evening Shema? And now we come to the next Mishnah, which says, when can we recite the Kriyat Shema in the morning? Because we have a mitzvah to recite the Kriyat Shema in the evening, and we have a mitzvah to recite the Kriyat Shema in the morning. Answers the Gemara, answers the Mishnah, I should say, Misha Yakir Ben Techeles Levan. From the time that a person can recognize between these two colors, one is Techeles, as we're going to learn. Techeles is a type of a blue color, which was the color that was excreted by a particular creature, as we're going to learn about in the sea. And through extracting the particular liquid from this creature, so it came out in this blue color. And the second color is called white. When you can recognize between the blue color and the white color, that's the time that you can recite the Kriyat Shema in the morning. Rabbi Eliezer says, he says, when you can recognize between the techeles, this bluish color, and karti, which is a type of a green color, translated here as leek green. V'gomra ad haneit sachama. And one should complete this Kriyat Shema that one recites in the morning, ad haneit achama, until the blossoming of the sun, which means at the time period where the sun begins to shine in its full strength as it comes over the mountaintop, and one is able to see the daylight very clearly, that is the time up until when one should recite the Kriyat Shema in the morning. Rabbi Yehoshua Omer, take note that we see here an argument between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Yeshua, because this is very often the case that the argument goes between these two rabbis. Rabbi Yeshua says, Ad shalosh sha'ot, you can say the Kriyat Shema in the morning up until 3 hours in the day. So the day consists of 12 hours, and we can say the Kriyat Shema until 3 hours in the day. Shekain derech melachim la'amod b'shalosh sha'ot, because it is the way of kings to arise in the morning up until 3 hours in the day. Let me just bring in over here, once again, we've discussed this before in the previous Mishnah, but I want to say it again over here. The day is divided into 12 hours. But the truth of the matter is we must divide the day into 12 halachic hours, which means to say in summer, when the day is longer, a halachic hour is also longer. It can be 72 minutes instead of 60 minutes. On the other hand, in the winter, a halachic hour might be a lot shorter, because a day might not be 12 hours. A day might be only the equivalent of really 10 hours of light. And then an hour might be only 50 minutes. So when we say 3 hours, we don't refer to the fact of 3 60-minute hours, but we refer to the idea of halachic hours. If an hour is 72 minutes, it's 72 times 3. If an hour is 50 minutes, it is 50 times 3. That is the amount of time that one can say the Kriyat Shema until. A person who reads from here and onwards, lo hefsid, he will not lose out. Ka'adama koreh b'Torah, he is like a person who reads the Torah, which means to say, according to the Mishnah, the simple meaning is that ideally at this point in time, we should recite the Kriyat Shema at the Neit HaChama, when the sun blossoms over the mountaintops. But then again, Rabbi Yeshua says, really, you can say the Kriyat Shema until 3 hours, 3 halachic hours. And then again, another point over here is that anybody who says the Kriyat Shema afterwards also does not lose out as such, but there is something that's lacking. And that, of course, is that he doesn't recite the Kriyat Shema in the correct time of reciting the Kriyat Shema, which means it's as if he's reading from the Torah. A person can read the Kriyat Shema anytime that he wants to during the day, but in terms of fulfilling the mitzvah of reading the Kriyat Shema in its correct time, that's a different story. That must be done only until 3 hours in the day. Why? Because we learn in the Kriyat Shema, as we're going to learn later on, that the pasuk says that we have to recite the Kriyat Shema when we lie down and when we arise. We've already discussed about lying down. Now we're discussing about arising in the morning. And since it is that the kings arise right up until 3 hours in the morning, because they can sleep later than everybody else, so therefore that is still considered to be the time that people get up. And since that's the case, we may recite the Kriyat Shema until 3 hours in the early morning. From when does one recite the Shema in the morning? Let's take a look at the halacha over here. The time for the recitation of the morning Shema is from when one can recognize an acquaintance from a distance of 4 cubits. This is in accordance with the opinion of Acherim, as we're going to see a little bit later, and the ruling of Rav Huna, and based on the definition in the Jerusalem Talmud of the term chaveiro, as it says over there. We're going to see in a minute how this halakha comes out. What is leek green, karti? The leaves of this plant, see below, and it gives us the page over here, are a prototypical green, which served even in other cultures as an exemplar of color. So this is a specific type of green, and when you can distinguish between the green and the techelet. Why? Because techelet is bluish, and the green is quite similar to the blue. And so therefore, when you can distinguish between these two colors, it is clearly the daytime. That's most appropriate. So why did we say, of course, that we should make a distinction between the bluish color and the white? Let us wait and see more in the Gemara what is the connection between the blue and the white as opposed to the blue and the green. So techeles, a special dye produced from a species of snail. Now the snail was called the chilazon. Today, it's questionable if we know the exact creature which this blue dye comes from and the whole process involved. There are certain people that feel that they have a rightful source to rely upon, and therefore those people that go into various Jewish stores might well be able to purchase the techelet color of tzitzit, which they can place onto their tzitzit strings. And there are many people that hold by this and say that it is permissible. But as we're going to learn later on, those people who wear only white tzitzit without the techelet fulfill the mitzvah of tzitzit 100%. On the other hand, if the color of blue is not the correct blue, then one, of course, is in a situation of the possibility of not fulfilling the mitzvah correctly. And so therefore there are pros and cons, and there are people who are for wearing this tzitzit with this color, and people who say rather not to wear the tzitzit with this color. Whichever one you choose, feel free to follow your particular custom. Ask a competent halachic authority who you trust that this is to be accepted, and certainly if he says that it is permissible, he has upon who to rely, because there are many people that hold that indeed this is an acceptable that this is in fact the source of the chilazon and that they have found it quite recently. So this is a special dye produced from a species of snail. In Talmudic times, this dye was already quite rare, and the means of preparing it, including the species of snail used, were eventually forgotten. In recent generations, efforts have been made to identify the snail and to resume use of the dye. In the Torah, there is a positive commandment to use wool dyed this color for two purposes. For ritual fringes, meaning the tzitzit, one of the 4 threads of the fringes must be dyed with a special blue dye, and it is wound around the other threads. However, the mitzvah to wear fringes is not contingent on one of the threads being dyed, and today virtually all ritual fringes are made without the dyed thread. In addition, in the priestly vestments, wool dyed this color is used in all or part of the sash, the entire cloak, the ephod, and the breastplate. And now we begin the discussion of the Gemara. The Gemara begins, "My bein techeles lelavan." What does it mean that it says that you can distinguish between this bluish color and the white? Meaning, what does it mean exactly? How do we distinguish between it? What exactly are we looking at to make this distinction? If we say, if you want, say, you know what it means? It means bein gevavad amra chibara, between looking at a pile of wool which is white, ligevavad amra de techelta. If you can see the difference, if you take a pile of wool that is white in color and you place it next to another pile of wool which is bluish, this techeles in color, and you can see the difference between it, then that would be sufficient to prove that you can see the difference and it's light enough to distinguish that you can see. But the Gemara says, "Ha-belelia nami meida yodi." But hold on a second, even in the nighttime, a person can certainly know this, meaning even when it's dark, if you were to have just the slightest amount of light that would reflect off this white color and this bluish color of the 2 piles of wool next to each other, it would be quite easy to make a distinction between the 2 piles of wool. And if so, it's ridiculous to say that the time for reading the Kriyat Shema can be when you can make a distinction between these 2 colors, because of course you can make a distinction even in the nighttime. You don't even need the daylight to be able to do it. Ella, but rather, says the Gemara, bein techeles sheba lelavan sheba. You have to be able to make a distinction of the techeles, of this blue color which is in it, to the white color that is in it. Which means to say, if you take the tzitzit that we just spoke about, and that we're required to put the white and the blue together, the blue is wound around the white. That time period where a person is able to actually see the difference between the blue and the white in the tzitzit itself, when a person can distinguish that, then that is, of course, the time that one can already begin saying the Kriyat Shema, because it takes a very sensitive eye to be able to see the difference when one looks at the tzitzit itself, to make a distinction between the blue color in the tzitzit and the white color in the tzitzit. And of course, this is what we say, that this is the mitzvah, and we read about it in the Kriyat Shema of wearing tzitzit. We read in the 3rd paragraph of the Kriyat Shema that there is a mitzvah to wear tzitzit, and so therefore it is appropriate that when we can see the difference between the blue and the white in the tzitzit, which of course also hints to the fact that of course we wear the tzitzit in the daytime, so when one can distinguish it, that is also the time that one already can recite the Kriyat Shema in the morning. Let us continue. Tanya, it was taught in a brisa. Rabbi Meir Omer. Rabbi Meir says the following: Mi sheyakir bein ze'ev lekelev. When a person is able to distinguish between a wolf and a dog. Now the wolf is considered to be part of the dog family, or the dog is considered to be part of the wolf family. And especially in days gone by, when dogs were not necessarily pets. So the dogs would be found out in the wild, very close to the wolves. So therefore, when one would see a dog and a wolf next to each other, they might look very similar to each other. But the moment that one can distinguish, no, wait a second, this is a dog and this is a wolf, you can clearly see the difference. That is the time that already one can begin reciting the Kriyat Shema in the morning. Rabbi Akiva says, you know when you can start reciting the Kriyat Shema in the morning? when a person can distinguish ben chamor la'arod, when a person can distinguish between a donkey and a wild donkey. Once again, the donkey and the wild donkey look very similar. At what point in time can a person distinguish between the two types of donkeys? When there's enough light in the morning that one can clearly see this is a donkey and this is a wild donkey. V'acherim omrim, and others say, Mi sheyireh es chaveiro rachok arba amos v'yakirenu. From the time that a person is looking at his friend at a distance of 4 amos, approximately 6 to 8 feet, let's call it 2 meters for those in other parts of the world who need to make a comparison between the two measurements, 6 to 8 feet, approximately 2 meters, when a person can see his friend, v'yakirenu, and he can identify him. In other words, let's assume that there are no lights like we have today, and electricity, and we have lights outside that allow us to see. And in those days, there weren't these lights. All the person would have is a lamp or a candle, an oil lamp, whatever it was. So when the person would go outside, or the only light that he would really have that would be enough light to distinguish between things during the daytime would have been the light from the moon. So the moment that he would step outside in the early morning and he was able to distinguish and be able to see, hey, there's my friend. I know it's my friend, not somebody that I don't know. I know this person, and I can identify that it is Reuven. Reuven, my friend. Shimon, my friend. Levi, my friend. When he can distinguish that this is a person who is his friend at a distance of 6 to 8 feet, 2 meters, that is the time already that we say that there is sufficient light at the beginning of the day, which is considered good enough to already start saying the Kriyat Shema in the morning, because already this is the time that people are getting up in the morning to start their day. So here we see, again, I'm just going back to this note over here, where we said that the time for the recitation of the morning Shema is from when one can recognize an acquaintance from a distance of 4 cubits. This indeed is the halacha lema'aseh. This is the practical halacha. This is in accordance with the opinion of Acherim that we just read, and the ruling of Rav Huna, and based on the definition in the Jerusalem Talmud of the term chaveiro, his friend. That is the beginning of time that we can recite the Kriyat Shema in the morning. Omar Rav Huna, and Rav Huna said, halacha ka'acherim. The halacha is like acherim, meaning like the others. Whoever the others are, whoever gave this opinion of the others, there's a big debate who exactly are the acherim. But in the meantime, we just leave it as that, as we see that even in the translation, he gives over here acherim. He doesn't say who acherim are or is. Anyway, Rav Huna says that the halacha follows according to acherim. The time of reciting the Shema in the morning begins from when a person is able to distinguish his friend from a distance of 4 amos, and he's able to say, this is my friend. When you can do that, already you can say Kriyat Shema. If you get yourself a calendar, we've discussed this before already in the first shiurim that we were learning about the different times of the day. Go back to, I think it was shiur number 2 that we learned this in, where there is a time that is called Mi Sheyakir, from the time that one can recognize. Those who wish to can download apps on their smartphone, which give them all the times of the day. And they give there over there the halakhic times of when one can do various mitzvot. And amongst the times that are given, one will take note that there will be a time on that calendar which is called the Mi Sheyakir time, from the time that one can recognize. And people will say, well, what does that mean exactly? Here is the answer. It means that this is the earliest time that one can already recite the Kriyat Shema in the morning. Omar Abaye, Abaye said, Litefillin ka'acherim. Oh, for the mitzvah of tefillin, we hold like acherim, likriyat shema. But the truth of the matter is, for the mitzvah of kriyat shema, kavatikin, we should recite the kriyat shema ideally at the period of time which is called vatikin. Now, the Rashi explains over here that the vatikin are people who are lovers of the mitzvot, and they want to fulfill the mitzvah in the best possible manner. And so because of this, the ideal time to recite the Kriyat Shema is at the time of just before Netzach Hama. As we're going to learn, when the sun begins to make its way over the mountains, and it begins to illuminate the entire earth. And we can clearly see at that time, at that early moment in the morning, especially when it's the summer and it's really early, that is the ideal time to recite the Kriyat Shema. But the time for reciting, for putting on the tefillin is an earlier time than that. The time for tefillin is Misha Yakir. But it doesn't mean to say you can't recite the Kriyat Shema before. One can. But in fact, ideally, the correct time to recite the Kriyat Shema is what's called Vatikin, the Omar Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said, Vatikin hayu gomrim osa im hanetzachama, that the Vatikin would complete the mitzvah of reciting the Kriyat Shema with the sunrise. And therefore, that is the correct approach. One would put one's tefillin on already before, and then one would begin davening. And then when it comes to the time of reciting the Kriyat Shema, one plans it in such a way that one gets to the Kriyat Shema so that the Kriyat Shema is said just before the sun rises. And as the sun rises, as it makes its way through, and if one looks on one's calendar, if you look on your app on your smartphone, or you download your calendar, for example, from a site like mazmanim.com, which we already discussed in the second or third shiur, I forget exactly where it was, but when we were discussing it, there it points out the earliest time that one can recite the Kriyat Shema, and the ideal time to recite the Shmona Esrei, which is Vatikin, which means reciting the Kriyat Shema just before the Netzach Hama, so that at Netzach Hama, one takes 3 steps back, 3 steps forward, and begins to recite the prayer that is a mitzvah to daven to Hashem at the earliest possible time, doing our Shmona Esrei, the ultimate prayer, tefillah, at the exact moment that it's the first moment that we can fulfill this mitzvah. And indeed, we fulfill the mitzvah at the very first possible moment. This is called Vatikin, as he translates there, the pious. Let us take a look over here in the halacha, where it says the recitation of the Shema in accordance with the Vatikin. Optimally, the mitzvah is to recite Shema adjacent to sunrise in accordance with the custom of the Vatikin. Now, as we said before, in the summer, Vatikin could be very early. It could be already at 5 o'clock or even earlier, depending on which part of the world we are. Which means to say, if a person wants to fulfill this mitzvah, especially in the summer, one has to really make sure to get up early, because one has to prepare for davening. One has to put on one's talis and tefillin. One has to daven the brochas. One has to daven Pesukei de Zimra. And then one says the brachot for Kriyat Shema. And then only afterwards, one recites the Shmona Esrei prayer, which means one has to be at davening already 20 minutes at least before Vatikin. If, in other words, if the Netzach Hama is going to be at, let's say, 10 to 5 in the morning, we have to start our davening already at 4:30, which means we must certainly wake up probably at the latest 4 o'clock in order that we can prepare for davening and travel to the shul. If, of course, we are davening in a shul nowadays, there are questions as to should we daven in a shul, shouldn't we daven in a shul, different opinions. Everybody should ask their rabbi, who is considered to be a mainstream Judaism, a halachic authority. What should one do with the virus? Is it correct to daven in a minyan? Is it better not to daven in a minyan? Each person should follow in accordance with the custom of his rabbi, who is, of course, an acceptable authority, and one should do so with great responsibility, not to put the lives of others in danger. And therefore, if it means davening by oneself, then at this point in time, one could still wake up at 4:30 and already start one's preparation, see when is the earliest time that one can put on tefillin, not to put on tefillin before that. And then one recites the bracha on tefillin and the talis and then tefillin, and one prepares one's davening and whatever. If, of course, one davens at shul, one has to make sure to get up a little bit earlier, because one will have to travel there. Either one is walking if one doesn't have a car, or alternatively, one would have to get into one's car and travel, and it takes a little bit extra time. In the winter, on the other hand, the Vatikin time, the Netzach Hama time, is going to be later, because sunrise is later. Sunrise in the winter could be at 10 to 7 in the morning, in comparison to 10 to 5 in the summer. In winter, it's 10 to 7. And then, of course, one cannot just daven at 6 o'clock in the morning, because that's too early. One has to only daven at the time which one is allowed to daven. But as we learned already in the Mishnah, we have a maximum time as well that one can daven until, and one can still fulfill one's obligation. According to the Mishnah, one has 3 hours to daven. But as with all things, Do we love the mitzvah, or do we feel it to be a burden? A person who feels the mitzvah to be more of a burden will get out of bed a little bit later and fulfill the mitzvah as he should. And there's nothing wrong with that. He did well. He fulfilled the mitzvah. We cannot criticize him. But a person who loves the mitzvah, these were like the Vatikin. These were the people that loved mitzvahs and who do love mitzvahs today. They wake up as early as possible. Of course, already we've discussed this issue in other shiurim and so on and so forth, that ideally we want to already wake up at Chatzois, at midnight time, to recite the Tikkun Chatzois, and then to continue our Seder of the day by studying Torah in the early hours of the morning, and thereafter prepare for davening, perhaps by going to the mikvah, and preparing oneself for davening in order to fulfill the mitzvahs in the earliest possible time. Those who love mitzvahs try to do these mitzvahs as soon as they can. It's a real opportunity. Imagine, for example, that we would know that in our business, if we opened up our business at 4 o'clock in the morning, there would be thousands of people waking up already, and they would be lining up outside our store to purchase things from us. Or we could start our business at 7:30 or 8 o'clock in the morning, when people would also stream to the business. Well, if we're interested in money and we really want to make a lot of money, and we know that people are going to be buying and they're even going to pay double because they want to be there so early to get the goods before anybody else does, they prepare to pay double. So we'd start our business at 4 o'clock in the morning already. We wouldn't worry. We'd get out of bed. We'd know we make a lot of money, and we'd feel very satisfied with this. We wouldn't want to be oversleeping and afterwards find that we lost out on 2 hours worth or 3 hours or 4 hours worth of possible business when we could have really made a fortune of money. So those who love business and they know that they can make lots of money by being in their business at an earlier time in the day, preparing for things, whatever is necessary, they rush off to their business early in the morning as fast as possible because they're excited to get all that money. So too, a person who is excited by mitzvot wants to fulfill those mitzvot at the earliest possible time. He loves Hashem, and he wants to do that mitzvah in the best possible manner. When it comes to Kriyat Shema in the morning, the ideal is to daven kavatikin as the time of those people that love mitzvahs. They're enthusiastic about mitzvahs. They want to perform the mitzvah in the best possible manner as soon as possible. They just can't wait. It's brought in many sources, for example, that there are some people that love the mitzvah of tefillin so much that when, for example, it comes to the period of time of Chol HaMoed, that period of time in Pesach and Sukkot, when, according to many customs, Hasidic customs and the custom in Eretz Israel, is not to wear tefillin during Chol HaMoed. Unless, of course, it is your custom, well, you'd have to ask a shaila once again. You'd have to ask your particular halachic authority, if you were living in Eretz Israel, what is the custom over here? Do I put tefillin on? Don't. And again, you need to follow your particular rabbi, what is correct for you, what is your custom. But nevertheless, for the majority, in Eretz Israel, nobody puts on tefillin during Chol HaMoed. And certainly the Hasidim do not wear tefillin. There are some people that love the mitzvah of tefillin so much that when it comes to the last day of the festival, the final day, and the day ends, they make sure that that night when they're sleeping, that they wake up extra special early in anticipation of the opportunity to put their tefillin back on again. Because they lost out already on 7 days of fulfilling this particular mitzvah, or 8 days, depending on if we're in a diaspora or whether we're in Eretz Israel. And since they didn't fulfill the mitzvah tefillin, they can't wait to put the tefillin on at the earliest possible time. They look on the calendar. As soon as it's the time that they can put tefillin on, immediately they put tefillin on. They love the mitzvah so much. So too, this applies to anybody who values, of course, this mitzvah of Kriyat Shema. The moment it is the earliest possible time that we can recite the Kriyat Shema in the morning, that's the time I want to do it, because I love Hashem and I love this mitzvah of being able to accept upon myself the yoke of heaven, the all Malchut Shamayim, the yoke of the kingdom of heaven, at the earliest possible time in the morning. And therefore, I want to daven Kriyat Shema at that time and not to have to wait 3 hours or 2.5 hours, even though I can theoretically wait that amount of time. So this is the story of the Vatikin. Tanya Nami Haki, it's also taught in a brisa. In other words, it was also taught. The same idea that we're speaking about now was taught somewhere else. Vatikin, hayu gomrim ota ima neitzachama. The Vatikin, these people who love the mitzvot, and they're enthusiastic about the mitzvahs, and they want to do the mitzvahs in the best possible manner, as fast as they can. They want to really do the mitzvah. They used to finish the Kriyat Shema with the Neitz Hachama, with the sunrise. As soon as the sun begins to blossom over the mountain tops, and one can see the sun in its full strength as it comes out over the mountains, so they would finish off reciting the Kriyat Shema at Neitz Hachama. Not start it, but finish it. Why? In order to join together the redemption to the prayer. And consequently, they would be davening during the daytime, which means the first time that a person can start davening his Shemona Esrei, ideally, is when the day begins. When does the day begin? At Neitz Hachama. So therefore, what did the Vatican used to do? Or the Vatican of today also? It's no difference. They make sure that they finish the Kriyat Shema just before sunrise. And then just before sunrise, according to the calendar, of course, we look and we see sunrise will be at 6:22 and 20 seconds. If you look at modern calendars today, it is calculated to such perfection that if one has a watch that is absolutely correct, one can get that time almost absolutely perfect. It's interesting to note that the Ben Ish Chai says that it is really a gift from God to be able to recite and to fulfill this mitzvah in its exact time, because the exact time is so perfect. It's just a moment in time that to be able to fulfill it at that exact moment requires real siyata dishmaya. So in other words, people today, of course, people who try to fulfill this mitzvah do the best that they can, and of course, they really do fulfill the mitzvah in all of its splendor. But as the Ben Ish Chai says, to fulfill the mitzvah in the absolute perfect moment would require perfect siyata dishmaya, absolute perfect help from heaven, because there is a certain point in time of exactness when this moment occurs, and if one is able to join the geula to tefillah at that point in time, is a very great thing. With our calendars as we have today, we certainly have the probability in our favor that we can fulfill this mitzvah really at that exact moment in time. Just take a look at your calendar of today on a smartphone, on one of the apps, or on, as I say, if you take a look at myzamanim.com, one can see the exact moment this occurs. And what we do then, we say, Baruch Atah Hashem Go'al Yisrael. Blessed are you, Hashem, who has redeemed the Jewish people. And immediately we begin, Hashem safatati tachu fi agiti lasecha. Hashem, open up my lips and let my mouth declare your praise. And then we begin the Shemona Esrei, which means that we join the Geula, Ga'al Yisrael, with the Tefillah. Because the whole idea is that Geula, redemption, comes about through the prayer itself. And when we join this at the first moment in time, when the light of the day is coming up, the moment where light comes into the world, that is the time that we are having our Geula. When we join that moment, we fulfill the mitzvah in the best possible manner. And therefore, those who can do it or want to do it or love the mitzvot should certainly try the best that they can to fulfill this mitzvah in that way. Interesting, if you do daven in a minyan where this mitzvah is being kept in this way, you'll notice that there'll often be a few moments of spare minutes in the direction that might be just before that moment. And you'll see very often that the community will wait. They don't start the Shemona Esrei, but they wait. If it's like a couple of minutes still to go, they'll kind of get to Yisrael type of thing. They're just about to start the Shemona Esrei, but they don't do anything, and they wait, and then they go Baruch Atah Hashem Go'al Yisrael, and at that moment in time, then immediately that is the Vatican, that is Neitz Hachama, and they join up, having united the Kriyat Shema together with the light of day, with the Geula, and to the Tefillah at the exact first moment that one can do it. It's a very special thing to do. Let us take a look at these final notes that we haven't done yet. The wild donkey. What's the story about the wild donkey? We learned over here that one of the times that we can start reciting Kriyat Shema in the morning is when we can identify the different time between when we can identify the difference between a donkey and a wild donkey. Here we have a picture in this beautiful Koren Talmud Bavli, which helps us understand what's going on here. This is the wild donkey. Here's a picture. The habitat of the wild donkey. And then he puts here the name in Latin. I'm not very fluent in these words. Asinus onager is in the desert. And today in the deserts of Asia, it is mentioned several times in the Bible as a symbol of freedom and wildness. The ability to distinguish between a wild and domesticated donkey can serve as an indicator for the amount of light at dusk and dawn, which means if we put this donkey, the wild donkey, next to the ordinary donkey, and we know how to identify the two. So the thing is, when the light of day becomes bright enough, we'll be able to see the difference between the two. That's a sure sign that's the moment that we can recite the Kriyat Shema at its earliest possible time. Let's just take a look at this note over here. From when does one recite the Kriyat Shema in the morning? That's where we began our discussion. There is a basic explanation for the various determinations with regard to the time for reciting Shema. In Shema it states, when you walk along the way, when you lie down, when you arise, as brought down there from Deuteronomy 6:7, chapter 6, verse 7, the time for reciting Shema is connected with the time people set out to travel. Since the two greatest dangers at night are wild animals and thieves, they are factors in determining the time of day when Shema is recited. People travel when they can distinguish between domesticated and wild animals, between a dog and a wolf, between a donkey and a wild donkey, or between an acquaintance and a stranger, says the Pnei Yehoshua. We continue. Hey id Rabbi Yosi ben Eliakim mishum kahal kaddish de Yerushalayim. Rabbi Yosi, the son of Eliakim, he testified in the name of the holy community of Jerusalem. Take a look here at the background. They were called by that appellation because they would divide their days into thirds. Why were they called the holy community? 1/3 for prayer, 1/3 for Torah study, and 1/3 for labor. Others say that it's because they would engage in Torah during the winter and agriculture during the summer. As the Gemara explains, those who both benefit from the labor of their hands and are among the Torah luminaries of their generation are fit to be called the holy community. Now, the Torah discusses this issue many times. We've discussed it together at least once in our Shiurim together, where a person who has the good fortune of having the opportunity to work and support himself through the work of his hands, together with the opportunity of studying Torah, is really doing the best that he can possibly do in serving Hashem in this world. There is a lot to be said on the subject. That is only one view. That is one way of understanding it. And there's a lot more to discuss about it, which we could go on for hours upon hours, looking at all the different sources as to whether or not we are entitled to study Torah all day long, whether or not we should work half day and study Torah half day, whether or not we should work all day. In today's times, things are very different. And sometimes it's not always that easy to be able to find the opportunity to work half day and to study half day, especially with the amount of income that one can generate through a half day job. In days gone by, in what we're talking about over here, it was quite possible, related to concepts like inflation, taxes, and various other things that went on, that people could work half day and receive the type of salary that would actually allow them to live throughout the month and still be able to spend half the day studying Torah. But in today's times, especially if you come to a place like Israel, well, if you talk to many people and you tell them that you're going through a lot of difficulties, not only will they say to you, work half day and study Torah, they're not going to say that to you. They'll say to you, what? You're here in Israel. Don't think about one job. Think about 3 jobs. You've got to work in the morning. You've got to work in the afternoon. That's one job. You've got to work in the evening, at least the early hours of the evening. That's another job. And then you've got to find another job for the later hours of the evening to make sure that with all 3 jobs, you'll have enough money to be able to survive the month. Now, that is a real scenario that people do encounter in this country. And of course, if a person is living like that, he will not in any way be able to put in time in order to study Torah. Each person to his own situation. People's financial situation is, of course, completely different one from the other. Some people are fortunate. They have had inheritances. So some people might have even won the lotto. Some people might be good business people. Whatever the case is, people might have wealthy parents-in-law, and as a result of the income flow that they get, they are able to put in more time to studying Torah and having to work less, or perhaps not having to work at all. And there are arguments for one and arguments for the other as to what degree a person needs to work and what degree a person needs to study Torah. Let's not forget that if a person is working, it is so vital that, in all fairness, the people that he is working for should pay him commensurate with the amount of time that he's putting in relative to the type of money that he'll need to live. And therefore, work is not going to be sufficient in terms of supporting himself through the work of his hands when he's not being paid sufficiently for the work that he's doing. Because if a person is doing work for even the entire day, but he only gets paid enough to pay rental and he can't even afford food, well, that's not going to help anybody if he says that he is working. What we mean is work that leads to an income that allows him to be able to live. Then, if he's able to do that, and he can work a morning job, and he can acquire that income to support himself, and he has that afternoon free, and he can study Torah, then he has the best of both worlds, where he's able to support himself through the work that he does, where he works in dignity. He gets paid in dignity. Let us not forget that part. It is so vital that he is paid in dignity for the work that he does, and thereafter he has the opportunity to spend part of the day involved in Torah study. These were the Kahala Kadisha V'Yerushalayim. These were the holy community of Jerusalem, who were people who were able to involve themselves half-day work and then half-day Torah study, and they were really a Kiddush Hashem that they were able to achieve, that they had the wealth to support themselves as well as being able to give time into studying Torah, a real Kiddush Hashem. Kol hasomeh geula letefila. Anybody who joins the geula prayer, Baruch atah Hashem, Go'al Yisrael, to the prayer, Hashem sevatati tachli, Baruch atah Hashem, Elokeinu ve'Elokei Avoseinu, we say the prayer of the Shemona Esrei, of the Amidah, Eino nizok kol hayom kulo. The holy community, these people of the holy community of Jerusalem, used to say this teaching, that anybody who joins the geula, Baruch atah Hashem Go'al Yisrael, to the tefillah, Amidah, he will not come to any harm the whole day. What an amazing statement. We read here in the halacha, which I'm just looking at before we continue, that one who juxtaposes redemption and prayer, one is required to juxtapose redemption and prayer and refrain from interrupting after completing the blessing, who redeemed Israel, both morning and evening, even to respond, Amen. The only exception to this is the recitation of the verse, Lord, open my lips, which was instituted by the sages. Others hold that one is permitted to respond Amen to the blessing, who redeemed Israel, and that is the custom. So this is the halacha lemaisa. Let us learn more about it so that we can understand what this is relating to. Omar Rabbi Zeira said, Inni, is that so? Interesting. You say that a person who joins the geula to tefillah, he says Go'al Yisrael, and then immediately he begins reciting the Shemona Esrei, he will come to no harm. Vaha, said Rabbi Zeira, but that's amazing. Anna smache ve'itaziki. Anna smachi ve'itaziki. I did that. I joined the two together, and I came to harm. So much for your wonderful saying that if you join geula to the tefillah, you won't come to any harm during the day. Well, he says that he joined the two together and he came to some harm. Apparently something happened to him on one particular day, and he had clearly davened as he should. Amalei, he said to him, in other words, Rabbi Yossi ben Eliakim, who was responsible for telling us this particular teaching of the holy community of Yerushalayim, he said, V'ma itazakt, what did you come to harm through? So he said, Damtiat asa levei malka, is it that you brought a myrtle branch to the king's palace? Is that why you were harmed? Something came about and something happens over there? The Gemara refers to Rabbi Zera's responsibility as one of the respected members of the community to participate in a delegation that brought a crown of myrtle as a gift to the king, a dubious honor in which Rabbi Zera had no interest. Hasam, over there, nami mi bayalach lemehav agra lemechazei ape malka. In that case over there, you were also required to bring some sort of price. You had to pay something in order to see the face of the king, which means you had to undergo something, irrespective of your story about coming to harm. At the end of the day, when you come to see the king, you have to pay the price. To Omar Rabbi Yochanan, because Rabbi Yochanan said, La'olam, a beautiful teaching, always. Yishtadel adam larutz likras malchei Yisrael. A person should always strive to run to greet the kings of the Jewish people. A person should put in every effort that he can to see and meet the kings of the Jewish people. Perhaps also when he says, of course, the kings, man malchei rabbanan, who really are the kings, the rabbis. So if a person wants to see the kings of the Jewish people, take a look at the rabbis. And of course, what we really mean here when we say rabbis in the fullest way possible, we refer in particular to the tzaddikim, who are truly the kings in that sense of the Jewish people, who serve God day and night in the best possible manner. They really are kings of the Jewish people. V'lo likras malchei Yisrael bilvad, but he taught. And it's not only that one should put in all the effort that one can to go and see the kings of the Jewish people only, ela, but rather, afilu likras malchei umas haolam, even to greet the kings of the nations of the world. She'im yizkeh, because if a person merits it, meaning that he sees the kings of the Jewish people, and then he sees the kings of the non-Jewish people, Yavchin bein Malchei Yisrael le Malchei Umas Ha'olam. He will be able to make a distinction between the kings of the Jewish people and the kings of the nations of the world, which means to say we should see, let's see how he says it here, to see how much greater the Jewish king will be and how his rule will be manifest. Therefore, it was a privilege for Rabbi Zera that he was allowed to see the face of the king. And therefore, even though he went through some troubles, and it seemed to be bothersome to him, and he came to some sort of harm, nevertheless, it was a great merit. One should strive to see that comparison between how the Jewish king behaves and how the non-Jewish king behaves. One should learn the difference and see the quality of how it is that they conduct their kingdoms. Omalei Rabbi Elah le'ula. Rabbi Elah said to Ula, now, let me just read this note here. I should just read because we're on this point here. One should always strive to run to greet the kings of Israel. Seeing the faces of kings or of the prominent leaders of the kingdom, as the Jerusalem Talmud says, even if they are not Jewish, is a mitzvah. Furthermore, some rabbinic stringencies were suspended in order to facilitate going to greet kings, and a special blessing was instituted for such an occasion. And indeed, that is the custom. When one sees a non-Jewish king, there is a bracha to be recited. Just as, of course, if one sees an exceptionally wise man or one sees a great Torah scholar, there are blessings for all occasions. When one sees a great king of the non-Jewish nation, one should indeed recite a blessing. If one is in doubt as to whether or not this person is considered within that category, once again, we do what we always do, consult with a reliable halakhic authority and find out if this is in fact true when one greets that particular king. And if so, if one has the merit to meet that person, one should indeed recite a blessing. Okay, we're going to stop over here. I'm not going to finish off this paragraph, although I started it. Thanks very much for joining me. I'm Eliyahu Shear from Chesed Ve'emet. And you can see my site at www.lovingkindness.co. If you've enjoyed this shiur, please like my video, make a positive comment, share the video with family and friends, and of course subscribe to my channel and click on the bell button to be notified of future shiurim. All of these buttons are available underneath this video and wherever you might see it on the YouTube interface. If you have any problems with that, please feel free to be in touch with me, and you can be in touch with me in any case at my website. Just contact me about any issues, any questions that you have, any things that you want to discuss about life, about Torah. I would be delighted to be in touch with you, and let's grow together in all the Torah that we learn. If you'd like to join one of these shiurim, please be in touch with me. And if you'd like to have a shiur alone, please be in touch with me about that as well on any subject of your choice. Let's grow together. Let's learn the material together. Let's do our best to complete what we can. Don't forget, I also offer lessons in Sofrut. You can learn to become a sofer and even write your own mezuzah. And I also offer lessons for chatanim, for young men who are about to marry, and of course for couples that wish to refresh their learning of the laws of family purity. I teach the men and my wife teaches the women. Please feel free to be in touch with me and we can learn these halachot as well. So that brings us to the end of the shiur. Thanks for joining me, and I look forward to another shiur in the near future, and I look forward to being in touch with you. Keep well, wishing you everything of the best. Shalom, shalom, bye-bye.